You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, welcome again. Welcome again to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney, and thank you again for joining us here this week here at Snarky Faith Radio. And guess what, folks? We're gonna be kind of leaning in on my ADD kind of status in my brain today. But I promise you, in some sense, by the end of this, as the dust clears, as we look at where we have journeyed over the hour, it should make sense. Now, that should make you all feel very comfortable that I was willing to lay down something as authoritarian as it should make sense. Because that's as good as you're going to get from me today. Because I feel like I'm like those. I feel like when I prep every week for the show, I'm one of those guys that has like a cork board and has like the red yarn and is like connecting dots and doing all of this like a crazy person does in the movies. Yeah, that's pretty much me every week. And I don't have the cork board, I don't have the red yarn, but I do have what do I have here? I've got a pad of paper, I've got a small dry erase board, and they all look obsessively crazy, and they're scrawled out all over that. So here's what you're getting today. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and tell you this, our theme, before we hop in, because if I tell you the theme now, you can leave, you can hop out, you can say that you have been warned. So if you stick around, this is on you and not on me this week. Got it? This is personal accountability. We're working on personal accountability in America, right? Because America is the place that likes to blame everybody else for our problems, even though we keep having the same problems week after week. Yep, that kind of thing. So you've been warned. So here's what we're going to talk about this week, and this is kind of a loose idea, but hopefully it will tighten up as we move through this. But when I sit here and I'll let you just in a little bit of my process, but I constantly send myself articles. As I read through the news daily, obsessively, I find articles. Ooh, send that to myself. Ooh, send that to myself. Ooh, and then I try to figure out if I can piece together anything interesting from all of these articles. Is there a narrative here? Is there something deeper to talk about? And most of the time, the answer is yes. And this week is still a very solid yes. And I'm not exactly sure where this is all going to take us, because we are live on the air, and this is kind of how these things go. But I want to talk about one of the huge problems that I've kind of seen. When I talk about life, post mass shootings, post El Paso, post Dayton, post mass shootings in America, and being able to kind of sit back and look at the weird political landscape of where we're at, and sit back and look at the weird religious landscape of where we're at, and the fact that both of those two things are kind of moving. They're wanting to converge at certain points. And here's my kind of thesis for our hour here is that we're at a place right now, and I don't think it's a right now, but I think that the right now that we're in, it becomes a lot more clear. Now, I think this has been a problem within American Christianity for quite a while, but I feel like we're standing at a spot where you kind of look at it and you're like, oh yeah, why didn't I see that before? Oh yeah, that's obvious. That is pretty darn obvious. And so I'm going to tell you what I've been seeing here, and is the fact of this is that American Christianity these days, and when I say these days, this has been a long time coming. But the Christianity is driven by fear and not faith. And that's kind of a big deal. it's kind of a huge deal. It's kind of an everything deal. It's kind of a why are we still doing this deal? Meaning that if Christianity is being driven more by fear than faith, what is it anymore? Like, what's the point? What's the point if we're using the name and the lingo and the words and the systems and the denominations, and we're using all of this to run machines, but we've forgotten why we're running these machines. We've forgotten why we're being driven to do this. We've forgotten why we're on mission. Why do we move forward? Why? And for any organization that tries to establish itself and set itself on mission, if you've forgotten the why, like the why you exist, the why you're here, why you do the things you do. Why are we here for people to show up every week? Why? When we've forgotten the why, we've become something else. You following with me here? Like if we have forgotten the faith of Christianity and replace that with fear, A, what is it? And then B, why do we still call ourselves Christianity? If that makes sense. Like a Christianity without faith really isn't Christianity anymore. Christianity without faith that is fueled by fear is something far weirder, and in certain circles far more insidious, in other circles just far more ridiculous. But I feel like in many ways that Christianity here in America, and I'm not saying this in absolute terms, I'm just saying this in by and large terms. We'll talk about this just on the scale of mostly, not every, but mostly. And when we say this, when most of this faith is off the mark, has forgotten why it exists, we really need to kind of sit down and begin to look at ourselves and say, what is happening? And one thing I want to do as we're talking through this, I always like to give shout outs to our brave and bold listeners, especially the ones that are brave and bold and reach out to me. And so those that are brave and bold and reach out to me, I want to give a little bit of a shout out here to JP. That's all I'm going to say. I give my people a bit of anonymity. Yeah. So first of all, JP, thanks, man. Thanks, brother. JP started a conversation with me and connected me in with a documentary I knew that was coming out on Netflix, but do you ever see that stuff where Netflix will give advertisements, or where anything in the world gives advertisements and they say coming soon, and you're like, great, I really want to watch this. And then it exits your brain immediately. Yeah. Yeah. So apparently JP is pretty much there just to remind me what to keep watching on Netflix. And there's this documentary or docu-series out called The Family. And as much as I will say this, well, I'm like an episode and a half in, so I can't say too much about this. So, sorry, side note, press pause and go down to the footnotes at the bottom. I have promised you, my dear listeners, that I will do a breakdown of Good Omens, which I have finished, because watching things with my wife tends to take a lot longer because we have kids and life and hecticness. And so we had watched the whole series. I'm going to have to sit down and watch it again as I come up with a show on this one. But The Family is also going to be a show that we're going to be talking about too. So for those of you Good Omens fans out there, I've not forgotten about you. I've not forgotten about you at all. I've not forgotten about my promise, and it is forthcoming. So this will be happening soon. And The Family will be happening soon. This new docu-series kind of about the weird organization of folks kind of called the Family or the Fellowship, or they have many other names, that have existed in Washington that try to broker power in the name of Jesus. You know, the kind of stuff that we like to talk about that's out in the open, but this is the stuff that's not out in the open. This is the stuff that's kind of behind the scenes and quiet. Kind of like, if anyone's been hanging around long enough to remember back when I talked about the Project Blitz show that we did, good Lord, maybe a year or more ago, about how you have these kind of crazy right-wing folks that are trying to they're essentially trying to push through a theocracy where they really say they love democracy, they say they love our country, but really they want this to be more kind of like a Handmaid's Tale type of utopian, they would say, not dystopian, a utopian future. Oh my gosh, so if you watch The Handmaid's Tale, there's so much that we can learn from this. Yeah, watching like the family and seeing a lot of what's happening, because again, this stuff is true. Or as I'm watching through this, again, I'm not saying I'm buying in part and parcel, but there's a lot of stuff that I've at least worked around Christianity to go, yeah, I could see folks doing this. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So, all I will do is not necessarily endorse this, but what I will tell you here that it's interesting, and hopefully we'll be talking more about the show in the coming weeks here on Snarky Feed. So, I'm going to stay on topic as much as I can today. So initially I talked about that we're going to be delving into some of the responses from the shootings, from the recent shootings. And so this thing came from Ken Blackwell. Now, Ken Blackwell he's on the board of the NRA. And he'd posted a meme, which I've seen stuff like this all around. And this isn't necessarily like, let's hate on Ken. You can, because he's on the board of the NRA, so feel free to do that, but Ken's not that smart. He's reposting someone else's meme here, but this meme that he was reposting that he got some flack about was actually, it encapsulates a lot of the responses that I was seeing, especially from the conservatives, about how to respond to a mass shooting. And so it goes like this, and it says this. It's got a picture of Clint Eastwood on the front, kind of in the "get off my lawn" kind of vein. That says, the problem is not guns, it's hearts without God, homes without discipline, schools without prayer, and courtrooms without justice. Which I love this. I love this in the most sarcastic nature that I can kind of throw this in here. I love this in an unloving way, but because it really points out what we're seeing from folks responding to these types of tragedies now, where it's, when Parkland happened, it's because we didn't allow prayer in schools. God's not in schools anymore, and God's using this to be able to teach us something. No, he's not. No, he's not. These are just nonsensical acts of violence from people that are hateful and bigoted. And honestly, sticking with the theme that we have today, and also afraid. And we're seeing this be the response for so many conservatives that, it's because there's not fathers in the homes. Oh, it's because it's because of the video games. It's because of this, that, and the other. And all these are just nonsensical excuses defending their guns. Now, Christians, what we can see here, case in point one, as we're going through the hour, Christians, conservative Christians, put more faith in their guns than they do in God. I believe it was Lindsey Graham responding to a question about banning assault rifles, and he was saying, well, when there's I don't do Lindsey Graham impression, but it's something country like, when there's a disaster like a hurricane or something like that, I'm going to have my AR-15 and people are going to stay off my lawn, which kind of comes back to the whole Clint Eastwood idea, like, I'll be able to defend my home. God wants me to defend my home. God wants me to have a gun. Because, again, we're operating out of fear and not faith. Fear and not faith. Fear, not faith. Fear, not faith. We're kind of picking up on that one, too. So, okay. So, we haven't officially descended into the Christian crazy, but that was a really good primer into it. Anytime we're quoting from the NRA this early in the show, I think that pretty much is the call. Wait, what is that I'm hearing? Huh? What is that? What do I hear out there? Oh, it's the call for the Christian crazy. So here we go, folks.
Lord have mercy. The Lord is my shepherd. He knows what I want.
And oftentimes here in the Christian crazy segment we have here, we do little tributes. Jim Baker's got a lot of the spotlight. Jim, you still got a special place in my heart, you crazy MF. I'm just going ahead and tell you that. Man, yeah. But this isn't a Jim week. This is someone new. Not completely new. Rick Wiles hosts True News, kind of an end times obsessed quote unquote news program. Because again, how do you have a regular news program that's about the end times? But Rick does it. So what we're loading up here, we're doing like a double stack. We're doing a double stack of Rick Wiles today because Rick is doing such a great job of being able to kind of speak into what we're talking about today. The Christianity has now become more about fear than faith. And when it becomes more about fear than faith, we get obsessed with all sorts of crazy stuff. When we take somehow like Jesus out of it and somehow make it just all about fear, because Jesus talks a lot about fear not. Jesus doesn't talk about fear more. He's really the kind of guy that's like, hey, wait. Then don't fear. Don't fear. God's got you. Don't fear. Again, that's my paraphrased version of the Bible. And we will get to Jesus talking about fear in a little while. But let's hop in with Rick Wiles. And you know what? I'm not even going to set this up. Rick can speak, and I'll break in on this because these are just so good. They're just so good, and they're so crazy. So, without further ado, Rick Wiles, hop in there, buddy. It's your time to shine.
You will see the Jewish lobby being the strongest proponent of red flag laws in America. Their henchmen in Congress will be fanning out across America on TV shows and town hall meetings promoting red flag laws. This is about confiscation of guns.
Whoa there, Rick. Zip up your pants. Your anti-Semitism is showing right now. What? Okay. So again, in response to our mass shootings, what we're getting here on these end times type of newscasts is that folks, watch out. They're going to start taking your guns. What does this have to do with Jesus? I don't know. But it's the end times. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere in Revelation. All right, Rick, just go on. Keep going with your crazy crap.
Of course, they are also going to tie it in with so-called hate speech. And to the ADL, anybody who criticizes the Zionist movement in Israel has committed hate speech. And of course, such a person must be mentally ill, therefore their guns should be confiscated, right?
I mean, this line of logic that you're running with here, Ricky boy, is a little mentally ill, and downplay the word middle. It's a lot mentally ill. But go ahead, continue, bud.
What did the Bolshevik-Jews do to the Russian Christians in 1917?
Eliminated them.
Yes. And the ones that they did not execute, they arrested them and put them in mental institutions.
Right.
Now, it's a standard practice by Bolshevik Jews.
Right. But this isn't
This are really pushing the limits with social media right now.
Right.
Because I'm going to tell you what's moving through the country. It's an American Ergen. Ergen never disbanded.
What's Ergen, Rick?
Ergen, let the audience, you look it up.
Wait, hold a second there, buddy. When you're asked by your co-host, I'll be nice. When you're asked by your co-host to define a term for your audience, you don't default and say, hey guys, you look it up. I don't want to spoil it for you. You look it up. Essentially, that means I don't know how to answer the question. I looked it up. Oh, I fell into his trap. Oh no. He led me astray. So it was an underground Jewish organization that was sometime around the 30s and 40s. So for any good conspiracy theory, we have to throw around terms that make us seem like we're educated. So Rick being able to say, history says they were disbanded, but they're not disbanded, and they're still here in America, and they've been waiting for a while, and now they want to take our guns. So is Rick telling us here that we need to fear Jewish people? Because, that's kind of starting to sound a little like, oh, wait a second, this makes sense. But I'll let Rick finish. Go ahead, Rick.
You look up Ergen. Do your own homework, okay? Study Ergen.
Sassy.
I'm telling you, what's moving through this country is an American Ergen. There's a killer team. There are multiple killer teams. It's Ergen. Ergen, my Palestinian friends know what I'm talking about, don't you?
We all know that's a lie beyond this point, what Rick is saying here, because we all know that Rick doesn't have any friends. Palestinian friends? Come on, Rick. No one likes you. I'm sorry. I had to tell you a harsh truth about that. But yes, so any good conspiracy theory is founded with words that we don't know how to defend. But when we go look on the internet, we're like, oh my gosh, there was a group called the Ergen back in the 30s and 40s. What's happening? They're here in America. They want to take our guns. They want to kill us. Oh my gosh. Huh? Yeah. So not only are we peddling conspiracy theories, Rick is also getting pretty heavily anti-Semitic. Don't believe me? Well. I already told you we got a double dose of Rick here in the Christian Crazy, and here we're gonna go. That didn't even make sense. And here we shall go, fair listeners. So there was giving you a little background. There was a film that was coming out called The Hunt. And Donald Trump tweeted about this. If anyone, and I would encourage you to do this, because you can understand the basic synopsis of this film by watching said trailer of film. But, I'm not like Rick. I'm not going to tell you that you need to go look it up on your own, do your homework. I will read to you the official synopsis of the movie, The Hunt, right now. 12 strangers wake up in a clearing. They don't know where they are or how they got there. They don't know how they've been chosen for a very specific purpose. The Hunt. The shadow of a dark internet conspiracy theory. A group of globalist elites gather for the very first time at a remote manor house to hunt humans for sport. But the elites' master plan is about to get derailed because one of the hunted, Crystal, knows the hunter's game better than they do. She turns the tables on the killers, picking them off one by one as she makes her way towards the mysterious woman at the center of it all. Now, this film, again, I'm not going to say this sounds good. I'm not even going to say it would be good at all. But Trump started this. Okay, let me retract. Trump doesn't really start anything. He likes to retweet things. Trump doesn't have original ideas. He just spews other people's ideas. So many conservatives had apparently not watched the trailer of this film, which I had already watched before Trump got mad about this, saying that, now Hollywood is making movies about smart elite people hunting Trump voters. So that's how it got framed. Now, when I read this to you, this is a film about the underdogs actually going and killing the elites. Again, I am not standing up for this film. I'm not necessarily, I've not even seen the movie. You know what I'm standing up for here in this is actually reading the damn synopsis of a film before you start spewing about this. But again, facts don't necessarily matter when we're dealing with a lot of these conservative folks and their uproar. Okay, so Rick Wiles is also going to get on this. Trump has been mad, decrying this. Oh my gosh, look at what the Hollywood elites are doing. They're making movies about killing Trump voters. It's not about that. It's actually the exact opposite of that. It's about the exact opposite of that. But, as we know, we don't want to let things like, facts get in the way of stuff that Trump is talking about or Rick Wiles, because Rick used this whole thing to get a little deeper anti-Semitic. Now, our last little dose of anti-Semitism was earlier in the week, and this one, Rick just came back to the buffet for more. So, Rick, what's your take on this film that you have no idea what you're talking about with, huh? Can you give us your informed opinion about how uninformed you are, but make it seriously racist, anti-Semitic, and bigoted? I'm pretty sure you can. Here you go, Rick.
It's time to shut down Jewish Hollywood.
What the hell? It never gets easy hearing that, but he just keeps getting better, kind of like fine anti-Semitic wine.
They're talking about murdering conservative, Christian, rural citizens in this country. That's no joke. The Jews of Hollywood spent tens of millions of dollars to produce that movie. This is not a joke. This isn't satire. They're sending a message. get ready to kill conservatives. I don't know what to say to you people anymore. I've been trying to warn the people what's coming. I've been trying for years, and I'm being as open as I can. The Jews are plotting a Jacobin revolution in this country. If that hasn't convinced you, what will it take? Next year when they're shooting you, are you going to say, they told us they were going to do this?
Now, let me remind you in this moment here that Rick is very outraged about something that doesn't happen, that's something that doesn't actually exist. He's mad about a movie that does not exist. It only really exists in his head because he never actually decided to actually look into what he's talking about for his outrage.
They'll make sure that the Trump voters never do it again.
Right.
I've been mocked for years for warning that this revolution is coming. I didn't make that movie. The Jews in Hollywood made that movie.
That's right.
This is so nonsensical and so fear-based and such fear-mongering, and none of it is even based on anything remotely in reality. He's so angry based upon something that Trump tweeted out that Trump didn't even know what he was talking about. So Rick is just using this to go on some sort of anti-Semitic tear against a film that he's describing that doesn't really exist in how he's describing this. But that actually speaks very well to where we are at right now in the country. We have fear-mongering that has become religion. We have folks that we have mass shootings are because people don't respect God enough, and somehow God is this a-hole in the sky that's like, yeah, just go ahead, let there be, instead of let there be light, let there be mass shootings, if only they would have allowed prayer in school. Let them enjoy this. No, or then you have folks that asshats like Rick Wiles and who are using these scenarios and situations to inflame anti-Semitism. Which we're gonna hop into right now, like as part of what we're dissecting here for this hour, which is crazy as hell. Because what begins to happen when you have a Christianity, when you have a faith that has no faith and is only driven by fear, you're just gonna have chaos. Because in many ways, as we will descend into this next article that we're going to use to talk about this it's craziness. And this comes from the Religion News Service from earlier in the month of August in an article called Trump's Judeo-Christian Vision by their editor, Mark Silk. And here's what begins to happen also when you really don't have any facts and you really just start to play this blame game and it's really just all based out of fear. You're not even really sure where you stand anymore, because typically the conservative, crazy, right-wing Christian would always be very well. Okay, so I'm sorry. Let me back it up just a second here, because what begins to happen is when you're driven by fear, you get a worldview that becomes very hyper irrational. So on one hand, you will see conservative Christians say that we must always support Israel. Always. The Israel of the Bible. We must always support Israel. They applauded when Trump moved the embassy, right? So this is, oh, look at what our president is doing. He's supporting Israel, right? So we have that. But within the same conservative Christian ideals and craziness, you also have folks that hate Hollywood. And they will blame this on the Hollywood Jewish elites. So wait, which is it? Are you pro-Israel or are you anti-Jewish? Like what? What? Which one is it? Oh, so you don't really have a guiding light or a mission anymore. You really just want the world to look like the way you want it to, which also is a moving target. But at the same time, anyone that opposes it is anti-Christian or anti-Christ. Got it. Sorry, I forget it. I forget the moving targets of fear and hate. It's hard. It's really just hard. It's hard to be able to keep it straight from time to time. It's really, really hard to keep it straight because I know you guys also want to make sure everything keeps straight. But in this article from Religious News Service, and I'm laying out a little bit of historicity here, like a bit of history of what's gotten us here. And in this article, they're going to some great links to quote Steve Bannon and a lot of the mechanisms and ideology behind what is Trumpism or Trumpyism. I don't know whatever it is. It means to be orange and weird. So yeah. So I know we've hopped all the way from guns to anti-Semitic rhetoric, and now we're going to be talking about this weird thing when we like to use this word Judeo-Christian. But again, folks like to use Judeo-Christian to mean certain types of the Judeo, but always lots of the Christian. If you're kind of gathering with me here. And again, you're listening to a show called Snarky Faith, so I'm not endorsing any of this. The whole point of this is that we're actually through through a lot of sarcasm and really just letting it rip for what these folks are saying, talking about how insane, the insanity of Christianity that is happening today, and the fact that Christianity is being driven by fear and not faith. Right? Want to see Steve Bannon's Judeo-Christian values and how he sees these things needing to be rolled out onto the world stage? Well, I'll tell you that, and it's scary as hell. So Bannon says this. He says, eventually we've got to unite the Judeo-Christian West, and Russia is part of that. And now that's going to take many, many, many decades. Now, he's also speaking out against the existential threat of China. And when we have Bannon speaking, we have Bannon who knows a thing or two about the rise of white nationalism in Europe, and kind of when he hears those kind of things, gets a little giddy. You know, that kind of a guy. Yeah, that kind of a guy that was part of like the strategic vision behind what Trump is and what he's doing right now. And in that article, I find it a little fascinating because we've been dancing around this weird dance that supposedly, like, we would say that America has Judeo-Christian ideology. But we've also seen how a lot of far like right Christians can also very quickly get very anti-Semitic. When we talk about people that would be in Hollywood that would be of the Jewish persuasion, which is just weird that you would also have conservative Christians going off in that direction, but not so weird because they hate Hollywood. But then at the same time, we like to support Israel because Israel's great and it's in the Bible and we really don't know what we're talking about. That's kind of that viewpoint of this. Yeah, it's all crazy. It's all nuts. It's all just wacko. But let me just remind you, these are the people that are controlling audiences, people that are in power, which should kind of give us a little bit of pause to this. So, when we talk about what it means to be Judeo-Christian, have a Judeo-Christian ideology, I'm going to read this directly from Mark Silk here in his article. So he's going to take us through a little bit of history. And he says this. He says, in the 1930s, when anti-Semitism was on the rise on both sides of the Atlantic, Judeo-Christian language began to be used by interfaith organizations such as the National Conference for Christians and Jews to indicate a common religious cause. It served to signal the opposition to the America First anti-Semites, who were giving their organizations such names as the Christian American Crusade or the Christian Aryan Syndicate and the Christian Mobilizers. During World War II, Judeo-Christian became more common, standing for liberal democratic values against fascism. Right? Okay, you're chugging with me here. Okay, let me continue. After the war, the term gained widespread popularity as pastors, politicians, and pundits seized on it to mobilize the spiritual forces of America against the godless communism. As Daniel Poling, president of the Military Chaplains Association of the United States, asserted at the association's 1951 convention, quote, "We meet at a time when the Judeo-Christian faith is challenged as never before. And all the years since Abraham left Ur for the Chaldees." The article continues saying this. In his best-selling 1980 manifesto, Listen America, Jerry Falwell Sr., catching up with us here? Jerry Falwell Sr. praised the refusal of the state of Alabama to participate in any conference that did not establish traditional Judeo-Christian values concerning the family. Now, the enemy was secular humanism, embodied in such causes as feminism, gay rights, and stricter separation of church and state, and symbolized, above all, the issue of abortion. That Judeo-Christian cause remains alive and well, and Trump's speechwriters know how to generate applause with it. As when he told the Value Voters Summit in 2007 that we are stopping cold the attacks on Judeo-Christian values, and proceeds to launch an attack on people who do not say Merry Christmas. So first of all, let's go ahead and let's first of all think of the hypocrisy of this. That when Trump likes to use his terms, or folks within his camp use these terms, Judeo-Christian values, and also let's rope into this with Merry Christmas. What does Merry Christmas have to do with traditional Jewish history and values? What does Christmas have to do with it? Nothing. So it's just become kind of wordplay, or maybe it's just kind of like, verbal foreplay that conservatives like to use with us. Yeah. So when Bannon says things like Judeo-Christian, it's not really what he's thinking about. It's not really what he's talking about. It's not at all. And what ends up happening when we are pushed by fear, when we are pushed to make fear kind of the driving force of any group, what begins to happen is that fear begins to warp people's perspectives of reality. Now, anyone that would say that they follow anyone that has read the Bible or the teachings of Jesus should be able to say stuff like we're hearing from Bannon or the NRA or Rick Wiles, and all this other kind of craziness that we've wrestled with through today. That kind of stuff doesn't make any sense. Now, you would hope the church would just be like, hey, what does this have to do with Jesus? Nothing? Get rid of it. But sadly, nobody asked that question. Nobody asked it. Nobody asked Rick Wiles, what does him hating the quote-unquote Hollywood Jews have anything to do with this? I don't know. None of it has to do with his faith. I think it just has to do with some sort of broken, weird, and perverted ideology that people still ascribe to and somehow continue to still label Christianity. But none of it has to do with Jesus, and it's just all weird and messed up. It's just weird and really messed up. And the article I was quoting from earlier, too, they quote a little bit more of Steve Bannon and how he likes to use Judeo-Christian. And when he uses Judeo-Christian, it may not be exactly the way that we are thinking. So he was speaking over Skype to a conservative Catholic Human Dignity Institute that was held in the Vatican in 2014. Bannon said this. So I think the discussion of, should we put a cap on wealth creation and distribution? It's something that should be at the heart of every Christian that is a capitalist. What is the purpose of whatever I'm doing with this wealth? What is the purpose of what I'm doing with the ability that God has given us, the divine providence he has given us to actually be creators of jobs and creators of wealth? I think it really behooves all of us to really take a hard look and make sure that we are reinvesting that back into positive things, but also to make sure that we understand that we're at the very beginning stages of global conflict. And if we do not bind together as partners with others in other countries, that this conflict is only going to metastasize. So again, we see this like very nature of him using Christian, Judeo-Christian speak kind of things to be able to talk about, those capitalist Christians out there. Capitalist Christians where Jesus is the wolf of Wall Street, makes lots of money. I don't even really know what that means. But Bannon is speaking more from a perspective of riling up conversations about race and superiority and bisecting that with this idea of capitalism and money and what we need to do with that. And again, he's framing this whole conversation about Judeo-Christian values. And he's fueling it that we have this existential threat against China. Now, I think any day that we're trying to talk about Judeo-Christian values or Christian values, because again, I mean, what that should mean in common speak, Judeo-Christian values, would be taking values from the Old Testament and values from the New Testament, which are not mutually exclusive. There is a symmetry between both of those values there. The values of God, the values of Christ, which we can see in many ways that Christ came as I kind of feel like it was Jesus kind of, as he teaches, is more of a clarifying statement on what was written in the Old Testament. It isn't abolishing it. Christ even says he came to complete it. It's this idea that like, yeah, like this is good, but let me just continue to refresh how you're reading this. Like this stuff isn't about control. This stuff's about more freedom. This stuff's more about God and loving others and loving neighbor, and it's not become the thing it's supposed to be. So again, I feel like we're at kind of that crossroads where Jesus was at, where he was kind of trying to reframe what folks were thinking about and saying, I now tell you this. I also feel like we're at a standpoint now where we stand 2,000 years after Christ, where we're at a place of being able to say, let's let Christ's words reframe us again now. Let's let Christ's words reframe us again now and do it in a way that doesn't listen to institutions like the NRA that are playing against Christian values at the same time, being like, well, it's not guns' faults. It's the fact that God's not in schools or God's not in the homes and blah, 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 blah. Or Rick Wiles, who's just nutter butters out there, like, that's trying to blame anything on anybody else. To folks like Steve Bannon, that in all actuality should make us way more afraid than folks like Rick Wiles. I mean, Rick Wiles and Jim Bakers and Jerry Falwell Jr., all these kind of folks, they operate kind of in this side nebulous of like the further Christian right that again can be influential. I'm not taking away from that, but they kind of speak to their own base. But Bannon's more insidious. Bannon knows more what he's doing, and him even using language like he's using here, trying to tie in Christianity and the Judeo-Christian West, and trying to tie all this in with the policies that they're pushing to be able to marginalize people and inflame hate against groups of people, and do that with the word Christian involved. See, that's what I'm getting. I'm getting at more here like wordplay, because wordplay, especially when we have these definitions of what it means to be a Christian or what it means to, when we see that somewhere around like the nexus of like 80% of like white evangelical Christians voted for Trump, well, that says something about Christianity. And what I started off the hour here and what I want to devote the rest of our time to is talking about this idea of faith and ownership. Meaning that I was kind of, my hypothesis for this hour was that Christianity in America, by and large, is being driven more by fear than it is by faith. And as my wife would remind me, that she often does when I speak, to speak more fully in this, and that this has been a problem for years and years and years within Christianity. That we use faith or the words of faith to drive us to act out of fear. Fear leads us to hate. Fear leads us to marginalize. Fear leads us to push people away. Fear leads us to act as the antithesis of Jesus. But we still do so in the name of Jesus, which is what makes me sick and why I bring up this crap on the show every week in some way, shape, or form here. So, I've said a lot. about the messed up nature, the messed up background about where we're at here. So let's just go ahead and turn a little bit to some scriptures, because it is my firm belief in all that is good and holy that is within myself, depending upon how you feel about me, which you could say is very small or very big. I'll take it whichever way you want to shake it. But for whatever amount that believes in all that is good and that is holy within the ways and the teachings of Jesus, I say this, is that fear has no place in faith. Fear has no place in following after Jesus. So if those that are teachers of the word, those that are pastors, those that are mouthpieces of Christianity, if they are preaching fear, I'm going to tell you inherently, I will firmly, and I will fight you on this. Not really fight you. I will argue with you on this. It has no place within Jesus speak. Jesus had nothing to do with fear. Jesus speaks many times over and over again in Scripture where he says, fear not. Not fearful, fear not. Fear not, fear not, fear not. And as we are in these times, when we want to be able to lean in on the ways of Jesus, we have to remember that. Is fear driving us, or is faith driving us? Because those two catalysts will lead us to very, 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 very different places in our journeys. Very, very different places. And if you don't believe me, you can take up your issues with Jesus. I always like being able to bring in a sentence like that. Don't believe me? Well, screw you, because Jesus said otherwise. No. So this is going to come from Luke 12. We're Luke 12, 22, beginning in 22 when he tells us this. And Jesus had been preaching, and what Jesus often did, he would preach to the crowds, and then he would also then pull in his disciples, his followers, and kind of give them like the debrief, or kind of the deep dive into what he was really getting at. So yes, so we have Luke 12, 22, and he says this. And he said to his disciples, therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more valuable are you than the birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And then, if you're not able to do a small thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Consider the lilies and how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Pause. Let me rephrase what I'm even saying here. I mean, Jesus is even saying this. For all the nations of the world seek after these things. They seek after power and wealth and influence. Or as Steve Bannon talks about, merging your Judeo-Christian values with capitalism. This is all what he is talking about. And Jesus is saying this is all folly. This is all foolishness. But he goes in to continue and say this. He says, fear not, little flock. For it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For there your treasure is. and there your heart be also. The point what Jesus is getting here, the point what he's talking about here, and in many ways people will like to talk about this is about, well, it's just about being able to trust in the Lord. No. I really think what Jesus is getting at here is he's getting at the source of greed. And more importantly, what greed does to us. And I would say that the greed is fueled by fear. It's the fear that there is going to be a time where you don't have anything. So you need to get all you have now. And in this statement, Jesus is talking about all this anxiety over like material matters and juxtaposing that with God's kingdom, saying there is one way where you are obsessed with power and money and fear and all this. And there's a different way to live that isn't obsessed with that. God's kingdom has nothing to do with that. The riches you're seeking is the goodness that you were sowing in today. The goodness that you are sowing into the earth and to the folks that are around you today. And Jesus is just simply saying, here's go and do righteousness. Give to charity. Do what you know is good. Do not be driven by yourself, your greedy nature. Do not be driven by fear. As we talked at the beginning of this hour, this fear that drives us after shootings like this to where, oh, well, we've heard this. The only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Not anywhere in the Bible. And is Jesus against wealth? No, he's not. But he's against what wealth can do to us. Because what begins to happen, wealth and power becomes the end all be all in life. It becomes a driving agent. It becomes a corrupting agent. It becomes the thing that drives us to fear and makes us worry about scarcity and says, we need more. I need to gather this up. I need to demonize who are those who are not like me. And I need to continue to do this over and over and over again. And faith becomes something that is driven by fear and not faith anymore in the goodness of God. And that kind of faith gets taken over by charlatans. It gets taken over by false prophets or antichrists in this world. Sorry, Kirk Cameron, it's not one big bad guy. It's a guy that would simply be, as I read scriptures, something that seems very anti-Christ. Very simple term. Would Trump be anti-Christ? Sure. Is he a big bad guy that's mentioned in scripture? No, I don't think he gets that kind of a mention. He doesn't get that kind of byline. But from the Rick Wiles, from the NRA, from the Steve Bannons, from the Trumps, to all of these that continue to tell us to fear, and we need to be fear-mongering, and we need to worry about our guns and what we can do to get ours in this world, I would tell them just stop using the word Christianity, Judeo-Christian, anything that has to do with faith. Do not use that. Just be honest with what you're going after. But I know why they do this. They do this to be able to manipulate people. And my answer to people would be, think. Use your God-given brains. Do not check out. Stay awake. And make sure those that you're following after are worthy of being followed after. Are they speaking in ways that benefit themselves or that benefit the greater good of the world around them? Because, as we heard even earlier in that scripture, there will be people that will try to tell you it's this way or that way, but it's not this way or that way. Because faith and following the teachings of Jesus need to be driven and anchored in belief and faith. Faith that God's kingdom matters. Faith that doing good for others without benefiting yourself will, at the end of the day, make the world a better place. See, that is the revolutionary speak that we need to be getting behind. Not folks that are getting worried about my guns, my sweet little guns. Don't take them from us. No. Because I would say the people that trust in their guns are people that are impotent to God. And yeah, I just made that connection with you guys here. I do. I think that a lot of people that put all their trust in guns and being able to have an arsenal at home or their own sidearm or whatever else, they're overcompensating for the fact that they are fearful and they do not believe that God's kingdom matters. And God's kingdom does matter. And as we end this broadcast, just a reminder that you can catch us on podcast at www.snarkyfaith.com. And I want to challenge you guys. I want to challenge you guys as you move out into this week to move in a way that embraces bravery, that embraces faith, that embraces goodness, and that gives a big F-U to fear. I'm out of here. I send you off here with the greatest amount of grace and snark and peace. Catch you guys next week.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.